Hello, everyone. We are Dave and Debbie Cowden. We are the authors of the Prayer Book for Tired Parents, and we are also homeschooling parents. We have 3 kids right now, plus we have a 4th on the way in October, and we love helping other parents like you embrace your title of being tired parents and seeing how God is calling you to holiness, not in spite of your family, but through your family, and being a Catholic homeschooling family specifically. So thank you, Paolo, for inviting us to be part of this week-long celebration.
So we know that being a parent is hard work. It's between meeting the basic needs of our kids, educating them, doing everything we can to try to help them be healthy, happy, well-rounded. It can be intimidating to realize that the most important responsibility isn't to get them into maybe a good school or a program, but to get them into heaven.
So today we're going to offer some encouragement for you. We're going to offer practical ways that you as homeschooling parents can build up your domestic church and really make a conscious decision to help your kids not just practice the faith while they're in those homeschooling years, but to really grow in their love of God and become the saints that God made them to be.
So we do talk more about these things in our book. It's the Prayer Book for Tired Parents, Practical Ways to Grow in Love of God and Get Your Family to Heaven. You can get it at tiredcatholicparents.com. It has endorsements from Paula Siskanik, as well as Laura Berquist from Mother of Divine Grace. Some other names would be Chris Stefanik, Father Chris Alar, Jen Fulweiler, Kristalina Everett, Dr. Ray Gurendi, and more. We're very partial to it.
It's a good book, and they think so too. And before we get into too many of the details, the biggest thing that we want to drive home is that God called you to your vocation for your holiness. And he brought these children into your life so that you could be holy and so that you could help them be holy. And so no matter what's going on in your life, whatever's happening, whatever sufferings you might endure, sufferings in homeschooling as well, the family is the means by which you are going to be made holy. And the way that you design your home has a huge impact on whether or not you can attain that holiness.
So, the points that we're going to discuss today they're gonna help you to view your daily homeschooling life not just as an option for educating your children, but as a direct way to catechize your children and really form them in the faith. So, one of our people in our life that's near and dear to our heart is the EWTN Foundress Mother Mary Angelica, and we always love to listen to her her little quotes speak 1,000 words. And so one time she said, where most men work for degrees after their names, we work for one before our names. It's ST. It's a much more difficult degree to attain. It takes a lifetime, and you don't get your diploma until you're dead.
No pressure. So as we're talking about the strategies today, we want to make it more conversational. And so you can get an inside look at what we are doing and then be able to apply those concepts to your life. And we talk about 10 foundational steps in the prayer book for tired parents, but really for the sake of time, we're only going to be able to get to about 5 of them today. And don't worry, the foundational steps that we talk about in the book are very conducive to homeschooling. And we know because we put them together and we are trying to live them out. So the first step that we mention in the prayer book for tired parents is the Sacred Heart enthronement, where families are identifying Jesus as the king of their home and giving them a place of honor. This is the first step because it's essential for inviting Jesus into your home and also showing your children who the king of our home is. And so, Dave, just as a little anecdote, when we first moved into our house 4 years ago, we had a very important decision to make. And that was, where are we going to put a TV, if we are going to put a TV in at all? And can you tell us a little bit more about that? What happened?
Well, so one of the reasons that we bought our home and that we are very partial to our home, it's an old 1930s Dutch colonial, for anybody that likes architecture, but it is known because it has a very prominent fireplace.
It's right behind us.
Right in the front door, and it's a big firebox, big mantle, and you can't miss it. So a lot of people that we knew, they kind of joked like, okay, well, there's the perfect place for the TV. So, and we quickly we recognize, okay, that's where Jesus and Mary need to go.
That's their
And
throne.
that's going to be their throne. And at the time, I think our TV it's funny because our TV broke and we just haven't replaced it. And maybe we probably won't, but, so we did have a TV, and, I kept thinking, like, where am I going to put this? Cause we didn't have really a great other option for it. And like, we would not be able to remove Jesus and Mary and put a TV up. That would just be so wrong. So, Jesus and Mary have had primary place in our home from the moment that we moved in.
And anybody who comes into our home, the first thing they see is Jesus and Mary right at the front door. Even when our windows or our curtains are open, people who are walking by can see Jesus and Mary in our home. And when you do that, you send an outward message to anybody who comes in the door, but also to your family. Every time you walk in, you know that Jesus is King, and that changes your home. So in addition to the Sacred Heart enthronement, we also encourage families to get their homes blessed. And we try to have our priest over every year to bless our home, not just because it reminds us that our home is the domestic church, but also because we know that having your home blessed can drive out evil. It can offer spiritual protection for your family too. The Sacred Heart of Jesus is a powerful devotion. In that devotion, Jesus promises us so many wonderful things, like all the graces necessary in our state and life. He promises peace in your home. Hey, sign me up, right? He promises that you'll have comfort in your afflictions, abundant blessings upon your undertakings, like homeschooling and more. So as homeschooling parents, we should be jumping on this devotion. So if you want to learn more about how to enthrone Jesus as King of your home, I recommend going to welcomehisheart.com. They give you all of the information that you need. And of course, they'll be praying for you through that process as well. And so Dave, the next thing that I would love to talk about is individual prayer time. And Dave is like the master on individual prayer. He'll never tell you because he's so humble, but can you talk about what individual prayer means for parents, especially with parents with a lot of kids? Is it possible?
Well, it is possible, and it does, like all good things in a family life, it sometimes involves sacrifice, right? And so we recognized, and I think this was a trial and error thing, that we realized that we would have ups and downs, especially at the beginning of our marriage. We would go periods of time where we did not take time for each other, and like having, date nights and that kind of thing. But it also helped us to realize, like, we need to take individual time to pray. And when we were a couple engaged, we did a good job of praying together, right? But I think when you get married, sometimes you can very quickly lose sight of, I need that one-on-one time with Jesus, right? And that is the key, because we cannot, as a family, if we're mother, father, we cannot expect to pour from so to speak, the cup that is empty. So we need to be filled with the graces and with the Holy Spirit ourselves by our dedication to quiet time prayer with Jesus. And so if we don't have that, we cannot expect to give to our family, right?
How would you recommend starting out if a parent is not really spending time in prayer? How can they get to like an hour? Should they start with an hour?
I would not start with an hour, but the key is, you're not trying to make a drastic jump for if you're a family, especially if you have a lot of kids. It needs to be within the feasibility of your family. God's never going to ask you to abandon your vocation so that you can take time for Him, right? So if you're taking like 3 hours in adoration every day, but your family is not getting food on the table, that's probably a problem. But it might involve, saying, okay, like for us, I'm always usually the morning person. Debbie's usually the night owl. So you talk with your spouse, you work out a good routine. So a lot of the time it's usually me getting up early. I'll pray in the morning, and I have that quiet time. The kids are usually pretty docile. If they're awake, they can come down and sit with me, but we take that time. That's my time to pray. And then I make sure, like, okay, I'll put the kids to bed at nighttime, and then Debbie will have that quiet time at night that she can pray and focus, maybe read scripture, that kind of thing. So it's working with your spouse, right?
And how is the individual prayer time particularly conducive to homeschool families?
Well, and I would say that we love homeschooling, because the great thing about homeschooling is you you literally have the ability to plan your whole day, right? So you're less beholden to appointment times, or, like, for example, I've got to get the kids to latchkey before work. I've got to get them to, to the daycare. I've got to get them to school. I got to pick them up at school. I've got to take them to their team soccer practice. You might do sports. That's fine. But you have a more open day. So, a lot of the time you look at your planner for the day, and it's more flexible. So you can take maybe 10 or 15 minutes midday, and you've got your prayer time. So, and also you can involve your kids in it too. So you're teaching them from the youngest of ages. Okay, so we might do, an Angelus together before lunch. And after lunch, we might just take some time to pray a decade of the rosary, right? But you can teach your kids, and there's a nice rhythm to your day as a homeschooling family.
And for a family who thinks that might not be possible, we're already seeing it with our eldest daughter just turned 7. And there are times where it'll be really quiet in our house, even with 3 kids. And then I'll find her, she's in her room reading her Bible. So it's something that didn't happen overnight for us, but now that she's in the habit of doing it, we don't even have to ask her to do it or tell her that it's time to do it. She'll do it on her own.
I think we would say, with regard to individual prayer time, the beauty of a homeschooling family is that your kids have a lot more opportunity, I believe firmly, to have that downtime and to be able to have that time of escape. So a lot of the time we'll find that our kids they'll go off by themselves and quietly start to play and read a book, and like Debbie said, our eldest will start reading her Bible, and it's good for kids to have that quiet. I think we sometimes are of this mindset in our culture that we need to be able to have stimulation. Our kids need to be busied with things, or else maybe they'll get into trouble. I don't know, but that we recognize, like, it's good for the kids to have that quiet, that silence. That's when they can learn to talk to God, and it's also good for them to occasionally be bored, right? It helps foster that creativity. I know I don't have to preach to the choir with that. So,
and another good way that they can experience God's peace and they can have that time to listen to God is with point number 3 that we like to make, which is daily mass and adoration. And for the homeschooling parent, especially the homeschooling mom, this might seem really daunting, particularly if the father works outside of the home. But daily mass, I think, has been the biggest game changer for our family. And I like to tell people very briefly the story of the pandemic when churches shut down and we were not able to go to mass. We had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old at the time, and we had just gotten them into the habit of mass on Sunday and getting through mass. And we could get through mass most of the time. But then when the churches shut down and we were finally able to come back, it was a mess. And Dave, in his wisdom and in his brilliance, said, well, why don't we start taking them to daily mass? And I just remember looking at him thinking, are you crazy? We can barely get through Sunday mass and you want to go even more? But he was onto something. So what were your thoughts on daily mass and how's it working out for us?
Well, and I would say it's just a recognition, like we live by the sacraments. We need the sacraments, most especially the Eucharist. And so, for me, I recognized I had a deep need. I knew that I needed to be getting to mass more. I needed the grace from it. I needed to be able to be patient during the day, to be able to get through my day. We are so fortunate. We have a lot of good parishes in our area. And one of the things I love most about daily mass is that it's usually so quiet. Just that quiet time. And that feeds into the whole quiet time during the day to be able to pray, right? So I'm able to receive Jesus. I'm able to have that quiet time just to decompress and pray, offer up my day to God. But we recognize that the kids need that too, right? And so we've strived to, and for a lot of families, it's not necessarily possible to bring your kids to daily mass every single day of the week, but this is a scalable thing, right? And that's the whole point of our book, is that everything in the book was to be scalable for where you're at. And so we recognize, like, we wanted to try to get to our kids to as many masses as we could, but it might just be one day a week that you commit outside of Sunday to be able to say, okay, Wednesdays, we're going to go as a family Wednesday night for mass. And sometimes churches will do adoration nights and then they follow it with confessions and mass. And those are great opportunities for a family, right?
And what we realized too with the issue with the pandemic was not that we didn't have time once churches opened up again. We realized that we didn't have enough love. and that we had the opportunity to receive Jesus in the Eucharist every single day, potentially, after not being allowed to for several months. And so we started to pray, Jesus, grant me the grace to desire it. And I would say now, several years later, we're at the point where we desire to go to Mass. And Dave just asked me earlier, you're going to Mass tonight? Or are you going to be able to go to Mass tonight? And I'm like, yeah, I want to. Let's go. Let's do it. And I would not have been able to say that 3 years ago. So praise God that he has put that desire on our hearts and given us that grace.
It's a great opportunity, again, to be able to communicate with your spouse. It's a day-to-day conversation about the faith, right? Like, it's just from the practicality standpoint. Okay, we're going to go to Mass at this time, right? And then it's nice that when you orient your day too around Jesus and that he's your priority, it's so much easier for a lot of things to fall into place too, which is very nice. So we'll plan out our week, we'll plan out our day to day,
out the meals,
and it helps the meals fall into place. It helps us recognize when we may need to say no to other things, like not getting overwhelmed with extracurriculars because we wanted to make time. We need to make sure we're taking time to pray as a family, right?
Yes, sir. So, and again, just a quick recap. Step number 1, enthrone Jesus as king of your home. Step number 2, carve out that dedicated prayer time. Step 3, make it to Mass and adoration, daily Mass and adoration. Number 4 can seem a little bit tricky for some, but this is the one I think is Dave's favorite, maybe second favorite to Mass, but an examination of conscience and confession. So in the prayer book for tired parents, Dave and I have written an examination of conscience for parents that specifically highlights some areas where we may be failing, particularly as it pertains to raising our kids in the faith and how our children see us practicing the faith. But you love talking about confession. And so I'm going to give you a chance to talk about why you love confession.
Well, we, as parents, and I think it's all people, we sometimes struggle with the same sins over and over and over again. And that's what we find that we're bringing to the confessional. But especially as a parent, I don't think that I am alone in suggesting that it's issues of, patience, sometimes going through the motions, getting frustrated with the kids, these things are just so common. And so we recognize that, okay, confession, we have an opportunity to receive grace, mercy, and an opportunity to restart, and so I think sometimes as a family, if you have a lot of kids, it can be difficult to try to plan out, like, how am I going to get everybody to confession? We have a one that's going to confession with us, one of our kids, and God willing, many more in the future. But it does involve a lot of planning. So you add that to your daily planner, right? And we recognize, like, okay, so I work a very non-traditional schedule. So a lot of the time I'm working Saturdays, I'm working evenings sometimes. And so it was much too easy for me to say, okay, well, I can't go to confession because I can't make it to the Saturday afternoon confession. So I think that it was a good opportunity for us to branch out into the greater Catholic community, that we recognize, like, okay, this parish, I started Google searching all the parishes in the area. This one does confessions on Tuesday night. I found one for Wednesday night, and, Thursday, Friday, what have you. So it was easy for me to make an excuse for why I couldn't go to confession. But then I recognized, wow, I really do need to go. I need to make it a priority, right? And that, just put it in the planner and just do it. And I think the kids also need to see us doing that. We need to make sure that we have a plan for their sacraments, right? That it's not just like we can maybe have a planner for their education with their homeschool curriculum, but what are we putting in there as well? Like, okay, we're going to get them to a monthly confession, right? Or ourselves too. So.
And we have so much freedom as homeschooling parents. We have a gift that so many parents don't have because of their kids' traditional schedules with their brick and mortar schools. But we realized that when we stopped making excuses and when we started looking into, instead of all the ways that we can't do it, all of the ways that we can, it's one big yes for homeschooling. It's yes, we can make God the priority. Yes, we can center our days around him. And yes, we can lead our children to him together. And so the fifth step that we want to mention that's really going to tie everything together is to work smarter, not harder. And those small changes become big changes. And really that's a culmination of everything that we've talked about with making a schedule, making a plan. Sometimes that requires some creativity. There are times where we've had to go to Spanish mass, and we do not speak Spanish, but we are getting to mass. Times where we've had to say no to other activities, but also that we've realized that God has provided so many opportunities for us to make him the priority. And again, praying that prayer, Jesus, grant me the grace to desire it, because we have really, truly been able to focus on trying to love God more through our homeschooling, through our family life, through how we're ordering our days. And we believe that God has blessed us for it. And that's why we want to share that message with you. And one more point that we do want to mention is that in an episode of the Catholic Sphere that Paula Siskanik was on, she was talking about knowing your why for homeschooling. And for us, it wasn't just that we wanted to make sure our kids had a good education, but first and foremost, that we wanted our kids to grow up and stay Catholic. And God willing, they will with the steps that we're taking, because we're recognizing that we don't just have a Catholic curriculum, we have a Catholic lifestyle. And so when you know your why, then you can start to order your days around that as well. So Dave, what would you say to the parent who's listening to all of this and saying, well, that's nice for you, but I could never do that?
Well, and like Debbie said, it's one thing at a time. And I think as long as you know your why, that's when things start to fall into place. And that one of the favorite things that I guess I'll make a little bit of a plug for our book is that
make all the plugs you want, honey. We got books.
The book, the book. What we tried to do was tried to make it a conversation too. So there's a lot of open sections in the book with open-ended questions, and the whole point was we really want parents to think deeply. Why are you doing this? Like, why are you Catholic? Why do you bring your kids to mass on Sundays? Why do you intend to homeschool your kids? Why do you intend to homeschool them maybe with a Catholic curriculum? And if you know that, and if you can honestly answer like, this is the priority, then it becomes so much easier to start to make those other things happen. So if we talk about daily mass, I could never do that. Well, if I know it's the most important thing, that I'm receiving Jesus in the Eucharist, if I recognize his true presence, then I'm going to find a way to make it happen. If I recognize that I want my kids to be a saint, well, I know that if they're going to be a saint, they need to go to confession at least somewhat frequently, right? So then we're going to make a plan for it. If I know that the priority is God, we need to be able to pray. Okay, so then we're going to find a way to make 10 minutes of prayer happen. So it's sometimes it might be slashing away other things that just don't deserve the priority. But then once we know that one reason, why are we doing this? Then we can recognize, like, okay, maybe it's not that our kid is getting into a D1 school for sports, and maybe it's not that we're spending 3 hours a day practicing tennis, right? And nothing against tennis players, but it's just, we got to recognize the priorities, right?
And at the end of the day, God doesn't care if your kid is a D1 soccer player, or he doesn't care if your daughter is a prima ballerina. He wants your kids to be saints. That's what he made them for. That's what he made you for. And so we really just want to encourage you as Catholic homeschooling parents that you can be a holy family, and you can make God the priority, and you can do this. And so we're here to offer some help and some encouragement for you. And of course, if you ever have any questions, we'd love for you to reach out to us. You can at tiredcatholicparents.com. You can get the book there. You can get some more practical wisdom from us. And then you also can follow us on Instagram if you want to see a real life picture of what it looks like for us as we're trying to live out our faith. Our Instagram handle is at Tired Catholic Parents. So with that said, that wraps up our talk, our little discussion. Thank you again, Paula, for inviting us to be part of this week-long celebration. And know, families, that we are praying for you as you strive to raise your kids and prepare them for heaven. So God bless you.